Yeah, and we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. This is a place where we have interesting conversations. We try to find out what is most factual and logically consistent. So today we're just going to be talking about the upcoming US midterm elections and how there has been predictions that there's going to be an overwhelming Republican victory in this election cycle, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate races. So we want to try to analyze how true that is and what are the indicators to show which side is going to do better in this election and what some of the key issues are, some of the key driving factors that would motivate people to vote either way. Either things like the economy, things like abortion, things like crime, threats to democracy, the support for the war in Ukraine, student loan forgiveness, and so many other things we're going to be talking about today in this live stream. But before we begin that, let me just give my few minutes of monologue. I think this is something I want to be doing in the live stream where I just talk about something that occurred to me within the week. And so what I wanted to talk about in this monologue is the place of personal morality in politics. Are people's politics informed by their moral choices or by their moral proclivities? For example, I've heard this charge often and often that Republicans, evangelical Republicans, are trying to impose their religious ideals on the electoral process, on politics. And many people see that as a bad thing, that no, you should separate politics from, from whatever moral virtues you are espousing. And then I ask myself, is that really something that people can do? Is it possible for someone's politics not to be informed by their moral compass, by what they think to be morally right, morally upright? Even those who support things like abortion, those who support the trans rights and all those, isn't that a moral issue for them? Aren't they supporting those things because they think it's the right thing to do? It's a moral thing to do. So in that case, aren't they doing the same thing? So why should it be the case that when it's from a Christian perspective, then it becomes a problem? Can we totally divorce politics from morality, politics from our individual moral choices and biases? And in my mind, I don't think that can happen. I think that a lot of our political choices are driven by what we think is right and what we think is morally right. So I don't see that as a useful critique of evangelical Christians telling them to not to put their morality in a box when it comes to politics. I think it's unfair to say that to them where everybody else gets to do basically do that even if they call it something else. So that's just my few minutes of monologue. Stanley, what do you think about that?
Uh, I agree. If your point is character matters, then I can agree with that. Things like abortion. I don't know that there'll ever be a resolution. To that point, or better yet, I don't know if there'll ever be a, a consensus.
Yeah, there's never going to be a consensus. But the point I was driving at is that people's politics are informed by their moral choices, by what they think is right, not really what they think is, I say, politically expedient, if I would say so. So the critique of evangelical Christians that they're trying to impose their moral virtues in the political sphere, I think is unfair because almost everybody's politics is informed by what they think to be right. So that was the point I was driving at.
Let's
But
see
anyway,
here.
so let's get into the conversation. So Stanley, are you voting or have you voted? Are you voting has started, right?
Yeah, early voting has. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much going to vote anti-MAGA. I'm just not into it.
You're going to vote Democrats, and you've been voting Democrats all your life.
Well, you know what? Where is it? There's a guy in Utah, can't remember his name, who's running against Mike Lee, who's a Republican incumbent, and he's running as an independent. And I think, and I don't know the minute details, but he's running as an independent. He's I'd vote for him if I had a choice, and he's
Yeah.
independent. He's not
He-
Mike Lee.
Do independents actually win elections in the US?
Bernie Sanders is an independent.
What election has he won?
Bernie Sanders,
Yeah.
dude, he's like the one who ran against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but he didn't get the nomination.
Well, he's a senator. He's won plenty of elections. He's been a senator for like ever.
So has he been running as an independent all this while he's
Yes,
been a senator?
yes.
So, so why
And
did he run
and he
as a Democrat?
caucuses with the Democrats. But yeah, he runs as an independent.
Why did he run as a Democrat during the national elections? Why didn't he just go as an independent since
Well,
it's
no,
working?
no, 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 no. He's a senator. Now, why did you mean when he ran for president
Yes.
or the nomination? Because they're more aligned with his political views. I mean, AOC, the squad in general, they run as Democrats because Democrats tend to be more aligned with their point of view.
But he
And
could have run as an
frankly, I
independent.
mean, we have a two-party system. Bernie Sanders might be the only person I can think of who actually runs as an independent. Pretty sure he runs as an independent in Vermont. He's
Okay.
the only one that I can think of, and I'm sure there are one or two others, but on a national stage, he's the only one that I know of that gets away with
Hmm. Okay, so what's your pulse on this election? What do you think? What's the general feeling, the sentiments? Is the sentiment that the Republicans are going to carry the day? Are there any indicators to show that that is true, or is this all just bluff?
it. Say that again. I'm getting a lot of static on your end.
Okay, so I was saying, is it better now?
Somewhat.
Oh. I was saying, what's your pulse on the election, this upcoming election? What's the general feeling? The feeling that Republicans are going to carry the day. Is there anything substantive to that, or is just bluff?
It depends. I think I'm seeing more and more, red wave, but the red wave stuff is all from Republican forces. Um, Democrats are pretty quiet. However, I don't, I don't, I don't think things are any better than they were. I don't think there's going to be a red wave. I think Republicans will take the House, which is kind of historically normal. I think it's going to be close, too close to call for the Senate. Um, Republicans, it's a coin toss.
So for the Senate, the point was, but for the House, the Republicans
No,
want to
no,
take.
no, coin toss for the Senate. The House, I think the Republicans are going to take, but they're not going to, they're going to swing. They're gonna get maybe 30 or 35 seats. It's not. I mean, if they won all 35 seats, they're 435 people in the House of Representatives. 30 is not a red wave. A 35, a gain of 35 seats is not a red wave.
give us some feedback. Where's this static coming from? So we'll see how we can fix it.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you over the there's a feedback somewhere. It's better now.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better now?
Still a lot of feedback, but a little bit better.
Okay. Let me go out. Maybe you can just keep talking. Let me go out. Is it okay?
Still some feedback there.
Yeah.
But if you speak just slower and slower, distinct, I can hopefully
Is it okay?
ask if anyone's in the chat. If you would ask them if they're getting it, the feedback.
Jennifer, please just let me know where is this static coming from? Is it coming more from when I'm speaking? But let me just mute my mic
It's
now and
good
see.
now.
It's good now.
Yeah, at least legible, audible.
Damn. Well, so let's just try and have this
That's
conversation
great.
as much as we can.
We're good now. I hear you just fine.
Okay. So where were we? We're talking about. You said the allegations of the red wave is coming more from Republicans, and the Democrats are quiet.
They're
Uh,
quieter. Um, and I don't think there'll be a wave. I think it's gonna happen pretty much the way it's predicted. I think the Senate's a toss up. They Republicans could win, but it's not going to be a huge majority. Um, I think the House is going to be a foregone conclusion. The
mm,
Republicans will take it. However, even that's it's more certain than the Senate is.
but the House, isn't all the seats up for election? Isn't all the
No.
435 seats up for?
Yeah, I think all of them are up, but the last projection I heard is up to 35 seats that the Republicans will swing.
So why are we certain that they are going to keep the majority of their seats if all the seats are up for election?
Yeah, they'll
Isn't it a
that's
fair
not a
game that
that's not
anybody
a
can?
wave. 435, so they'll
Mm,
have 135 versus 100. And
mm,
depending on where, they win, some of these seats, you'll find Republicans 35 seats in the House is not a wave, in my
mm.
opinion anyway. It's still tight. A vote that comes up that's kind of iffy. Um, the votes will be close, but a majority is a majority. If they decide to impeach Joe Biden, and everybody votes, along partisan lines, they're going to get
Mm.
what they.
So the economy. Do you think that the economy is going to be the biggest determining factor in this election? I mean, inflation is around 8.3%, up from like 3.2 in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Gas prices are up, food prices are up, everything is up.
Yeah. And the
And
economy is going to be, and you can't, way back when James Carville said it's the economy stupid, and that rule of thumb is going to pretty much work out.
mm, I remember you mentioned something the other time that no president has ever lost when the economy is good, and you were trying to say that Trump's economy was bad. That's why he lost.
Well, I won't go that far because I don't know the details, but um, I'd say 90% of the time, if the economy's bad, um, things are going to change,
What could
election
Dem- what could Democrats possibly do at this last minute for the economy to for them to
the die is cast.
or the die is cast? Hmm. I'm hoping for a red wave
Now,
anyway.
I did hear, looking at the early voting, Democrats are doing a bit better than
Hmm.
expected, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean anything. It just means they're doing better. Doesn't mean,
Okay. So on to another issue, the issue of abortion. Now, Democrats have used this as a rallying point, as a rallying cry for their
Mhm.
base that if Republicans get into power, they're going to restrict abortion access more and more and more. But on the federal level,
Well,
what more can Republicans do than they've already done, which is return abortion rights back to the states? What more can they do at the federal level?
well, Lindsey Graham in the Senate um, wanted to basically enact legislation that's, you know, um, up to 15 weeks is okay, for choice.
Mm,
I think they're going to move in that direction. But to be honest, I don't think that's going to work. I think the states are going to want to keep it, at the state level.
mm,
I'd be surprised if, like, you know, federal law passes, um, basically redoing Roe v. Wade um, from the Senate as a law, because I don't think it would never pass the House.
mm. So you believe things are going to be status quo as regards abortion?
I didn't hear you last.
Okay, so I said you believe things are going to remain status quo as regards
Yeah,
abortion in terms of
yeah.
the impact it will have in these midterm elections.
I think abortion's gonna remain status quo,
Mm,
because there. I don't think even a 15-week, limit for abortion would pass the House.
mm. Would that be because of Republicans or Democrats?
It would be the reason it won't pass is because people in the House, the Republicans in the House, aren't going to go for it. And the other thing is a non-budget bill in the Senate. They have to have 60 votes.
Mm,
If Lindsey Graham said, "Hey, I want to make these rules 15 weeks, etc." He's got to have 60 votes. And even if the best case scenario is there will be 54 Republicans in the Senate
mm,
versus, whatever the number winds up being, um, as Democrats, like, you know, what would it be, like 54 to, it-
mm,
54 Republicans in the Senate is not going to carry, um, even an abortion bill in the Senate because you got to have 60 votes.
So that's even if all 54 Republicans vote for it, they will still need at least 6 Democrats, which is
Yeah,
most likely to happen.
it's not going to happen.
But why is American politics
And
like this? Why is it always so?
there are, he won't get all the Republican votes in the Senate because there are people who won't even go for 15. There are Republicans in the Senate who won't
Mm,
even go for 15 weeks.
mm. Okay, so let's talk crime.
Well, hold on one sec. There are
Mm.
people in the Senate who would go for a total ban. They're not going to vote for 15 weeks.
There are people who will go for a total ban.
I mean, Republicans who would go for a total ban,
Total ban.
or just like, hey, you know what? We're not doing federal legislation. It needs to be
Mm,
in the states.
mm,
Republicans or conservatives in general fought for like what 50 years
mm,
to move it back to the states. It, I think Lindsey Graham's proposal is going to be too liberal for a
mm.
lot of Republicans in the Senate. In the House, it's going to be dead on arrival. They're not doing
That's very strange. Okay, let's talk about crime. Now, crime, I think that should also be one of the hot button issues in terms of why people are voting in this election cycle. And the general sentiment is that Republicans are tougher on crime, while Democrats are much more liberal on crime. Now, my question is, every time there is a mass shooting, the Democrats always come out and they scream, we need more gun control, more gun laws. But what exactly do you think can be done in that regard to to minimize these mass shootings that go on in terms of legislation? What can be done, given the fact that the given the fact that the Second Amendment guarantees their right to bear arms?
Um, I don't think anything will be done, and I'm not even sure that anything can be done. You know, there are more guns in America than there are people, and
I can hear feedback, Zachariah. I don't know if it's coming from you. Maybe you can just mute your. All right, Stanley, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying that gun control, for the most part, that's just not going to happen.
What if it did? What can theoretically, do you think that legislation could help stem the tide of um, gun violence?
No.
So why are the Democrats always harping on about it whenever there's a mass
Well,
shooting?
I think Republicans are flailing as well. I think it's just, you know, when I was in the Navy, we used to call things like this a goat F or a goat rodeo. Um, that cat is out of the bag. There's nothing that can be done. Um, you know, you can ban assault weapons, you can do a lot of things, but I don't think there's anything that can be done. Um, Band-aids, you know, sentiment, you know, we pray for the victims. That's about all um, at a federal level that can be done. And, you know, I know Georgia and Texas, for instance, I don't even think you need a permit to have a handgun anymore. You know, there are states that are moving to just go, hey, there are no limits on having a gun other than, you know, if you're not a, you know, felon, you know, if you've committed a felony, you can't have a gun. You know, that's outlawed. But um, I basically think that the cat's out of the bag. There's nothing that can be done. I don't even think legislatively.
So I hear that some of the cities with the toughest gun control or the gun laws are some of the cities with the highest gun crimes, like maybe places like California,
New
maybe
York
places like
City, New York State.
New York and all that. Is that true?
Yeah, I think they have the tougher gun laws. Most of the big cities in the East and yeah, bigger cities tend to have tougher gun laws, DC, for instance, but it's the cat's out of the bag, you know,
Mm. So
and
it's
it's too easy to get guns illegally. The cat is literally the cat is out of the bag. There's nothing that can be done, other than at a local level. You have, police resource officers at the schools, as a deterrent, but deterring is about all that can be done. And we know how well deterrence does in schools.
mm. All right. So Zachariah, welcome to the conversation. I don't know how much of it you've been listening to, but if there's anything you want to contribute to, so go right ahead.
Well, I've been listening to it from the very beginning. I'm a Republican, and from how I see it, I think a lot more people are going to lean towards the right this upcoming election. I'm definitely noticing. Like for example, I don't even like talking about the situation because I feel like that it's irrelevant and it's old. But I remember one time, I was living in Seattle, Washington. I'm a regular civilian, just like yourself, Charles and Stanley. Just I don't mean regular like as a regular, but just a regular civilian. Mine's just business. I just want to go to work, pays taxes, etc. And I was accused of being a drug dealer because I wanted to conceal and carry a firearm legally. And these people are leftists, but they have Black Lives Matter stickers on their window in Seattle, Washington. Right? So I'm at a point in my life where I'm just completely right. I'm developing more connection with God, Jesus, with the Rastas. Definitely. I want to see more people defend themselves. And I feel like the lack of personal responsibility in this country is not allowing people to defend themselves. You see it all over the news. You see people getting attacked each and every day by these psychos, and it's like when we attack them, then we're the bad people. It's like, oh, but he had a mental illness. It's like everyone has a mental illness in this country now. Like it was not like this 10, 15 years or even freaking 5 years ago. It wasn't like this. I don't know what happened. I really don't know. I don't know. It's ridiculous.
Mm. So you're Republican.
Lauren, did you hear Lauren Boebert? She was, I just read it today. She literally asked, how many AR-15s would Jesus have? So, that
I
pretty
was
much
going to
tells
ask
me
that.
that's pretty much all it tells me all I need to know about personal responsibility. We're not electing people who have personal responsibility. So, like I said, um, there's nothing that can be done.
Mm.
So Zach, do you think that Jesus would sanction AR-15s and all that? I remember when he was about to be killed, one of his disciples pulled out his sword and cut off the ears of one of the soldiers, and Christ healed him back and told them that my kingdom is not of this world. If it were so, then with my disciples fight. So are the Republicans, are they bringing the kingdom of God right now, right here? Are they fighting for it literally? What would Jesus do?
Well, for those a person that reads the Bible, I mean, here's the thing, right? When you call yourself Christian or Rasta, I'm assuming that you actually read the Bible, right? And in the Old Testament, everyone who reads the Bible, like myself, you should know that there are plenty of wars in the Old Testament. I'm not so sure about the New Testament, but Erasmus read the Old Testament, and I think if Jesus, see, I think people get the perception that Jesus Christ was this soft guy who just walked around. Like, he was a respected guy. He wasn't a respected guy for no reason. I mean, he, quote unquote, sacrifices life so he can pay for all of our sins. That's a very painful process for you to be crucified over and over and over again and stabbed in your chest in front of the masses. I'm sure that's an extremely painful process. So Jesus can deal with that pain being crucified. I'm pretty sure that if wars had to transpire during those times as well, and if he had access to guns, he would use those guns as well. I'm pretty sure that he would, right? Because when you look at, they in the Bible, they had the same way how cattle was represented, like through riches, swords, and knives. That were there. They used those weapons, instead of firearms, but only because you didn't have access to firearms back then. I'm sure if they had access, they would use it.
They had access to swords and spears, and he wouldn't use them. So having guns, it wasn't going to change. He was a man of peace. He wasn't a man of war. He didn't. He preached peace.
Well,
He didn't wage war.
they had slingshots too, and a bunch of rocks.
So going back to the Old Testament, see, there are a lot of things in the Old Testament that you can't even use it as a reference as to how Christians should behave in this
No,
age.
no, 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 no. I was never making it. I was never using it as a reference towards how Christians should behave. But at the same time, like, I do notice you have a lot of people who, I know that you read the Bible. I read the Old Testament a little bit myself. You just have a lot of people who say that they're Christian, and then when we're trying to have these conversations, they can't really give me an in-depth like conversation because they don't read the Bible. That's my point.
So I think that having guns is a cultural thing. I think that Republicans trying to associate it with Jesus and Christianity, and it doesn't really work. There's really no connection in that regard. So I don't think it's a Christian thing to my Bible and my guns. I really don't know, because Christ wasn't a man of war; he was a man of peace. And yes, I understand the exigencies of today's world where you have to protect yourself, but that is not a religious thing. That's a practical matter. That's a matter of survival and something else, not a religious thing.
I understand that, but I mean, in the Bible, I mean, wars transpire in the Bible, death transpired in the Bible. I understand that Jesus was a man of peace, but when you look at Zechariah, I mean, my name's Zechariah. When you look at Malachi, when you look at Ezekiel, Joshua, you know, those prophets are represented only because they had to sacrifice something or they stood up for something. So I also feel like the Bible represents strength and courage, and sometimes that strength and courage was exemplified by war, you know. And that's why a person who has a lot of respect for anyone that served in the military, war has just been a big part of my life. So that's another reason why I also subscribe to the Bible as well. But I also feel like Republicans shouldn't. I think you should keep the politics towards one subject and keep the religion towards one subject as well. Because when you have a person like yourself who's educated on the Bible, you don't like the church is supposed to be a place of peace, and I understand that as well. So why connect that towards? I understand that premise as well.
Yeah, I think they should keep the guns out of the churches anyway. But that's another topic. So let's talk student loan forgiveness. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the students' loan debt should be forgiven by the federal government, like Joe Biden is proposing? Or do you think people took these loans and they have to pay back?
Well, I'm a person of just responsibility and accountability. Just I can only speak for myself, you know. I understand that the average 24-year-old doesn't have the average 24-year-old is most likely living with their parents still. You know, they're still trying to figure out a way towards getting their reputation in life. So I think there should I don't think there should be 100% loan forgiveness. Probably like a small percentage, like I say 40 to 45. No, like between 35 to 45%. You know, but at the same time, I will say this: listen, no one told you no one put a gun to your head and forced you to go to school. So you should know that, you know, with school there comes loans. Even people who go to prestigious universities, they should have to take out some type of loan. You know, everybody takes out a loan. Everybody takes out loans. So you should know that, okay, this is what you got yourself into. But at the same time, you know, we're living in a society where, you know, it's hard to get a reputation, you know, especially being a post grad. So I think there should be some type of loan forgiveness. I said between 35 to 45%. That's it. Anything higher than that, I think is too much. But I think anything lower than that isn't showing any empathy towards these postgraduates, you know.
Stanley, what do you think?
Well, I think if the average 24-year-old is living at home, we have a bigger problem than student loan forgiveness.
But Stanley, that's not all the comments. Okay, forgive whether or not the 24-year-old is living at home. What do you think about Joe Biden's proposal for this student loan forgiveness?
Um, I think that we've got ourselves in a pickle, and I, Charles, you know where I'm going to go with this. It's all about the parent. Um, I am on my son about, you know, front loading the argument. The better you do in high school, the less you're going to have to pay, for your college. And that's, I think we're in a position now that we kind of have to do student loan forgiveness, but going forward, there's a huge Republican thing about two-parent households and personal responsibility. Well, I want to see money where mouths are. And I don't think Republicans are doing any better than Democrats. I don't even think it's political. I think it's cultural. If you think a 24-year-old should be in your basement, you know, living at home, then again, there's a problem in and of itself.
So do you
24
think
year olds at home is a problem. And if it's thought is normal, that is a problem. Unless they're helping elderly parents or, there's a reason to be at home, because they can't, because their student loans are like, so much that they can't afford a house or an apartment. Um, that's not a student loan problem. That started round about, ninth grade of high school. Low expectations. And it's not a white black thing. It is an American culture thing. We don't expect enough from our kids.
Mhm. Wow. So let's talk let's talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine and American support for it. Now, some pundits have said that if the Republicans gain control of the House and the Senate, that they're going to cut funding to Ukraine. What do you even think, first of all, about America sending weapons and billions of dollars to Ukraine in this war. And what do you think the path forward should be? Stanley.
Um, I think the war could have been prevented, and I think Obama, if I really want to think about it, poked a bear a little bit, and temperamentally, I'm kind of like Obama. Um, However, I don't think he made the wisest decision. It, I'll just say that we should have stood down um, after the Cold War was over. We kept pushing, we kept pushing the NATO thing, and I guess you can't, hindsight is 2020. I think we should do what we can to, get Putin to stand down. If Republicans take the House, that controls the American budget. They're going to do what they're going to do, which is going to be 180 degrees from what the Democrats are doing. Let's see how it goes. It'll probably make things worse, but essentially what'll happen is Ukraine's going to, kind of be in the lurch. And I don't understand the Republican, love for Putin and all this stuff. I suspect, but it's not something I want to get into now. But let's see, let the Republicans do what they want to do. It's a different tack. So, let's see if it works. If they want to defund Ukraine, uh, let's just see what happens. I'm okay with that.
Mm. So before I let Zach in, let me just comment on this thing that Stanley just said about. So what could, yes, America poked the bear and all these things has happened, but what could anybody have done now that Russia has invaded? I mean, Russia has no right to be in Ukraine, whatever the reason, whatever excuses they've come up with. Isn't it a sort of a moral obligation for the whole world to stand up to Russia and its bullying of the Ukrainians? And for the Republicans, I think it's not so much a love for Putin as much as it is an antagonism of the Democratic Party. So I suspect very much that if it was a Republican president that was in power, both sides would be singing the opposite tune. The Republicans would be supporting Ukraine and be saying, you know what, we're standing for democracy, we're fighting a tyrant. And the Democrats would be screaming, oh, you are the war party, you're dragging us into war. And that's exactly what the other side is doing currently. So both sides are just they're just flipping
I
politics.
agree with that. We the pride is being diametrically opposed to what the other side is doing, and that's simply not constructive.
Yeah. Zach, let's hear your thoughts. Zach, we can't hear you. I think you're muted. Can't hear you at all. No, can't hear you still. Maybe you have to go out and come back in. Yeah. So, threats to democracy. Democrats are still pushing. They're still pushing the Trump claim of the election was stolen and all that.
Well, no, it's the Republicans that are pushing that.
No, the Democrats are pushing that the Republicans are saying the elections were stolen.
Well, they are. As a matter of fact, I watched. Trump does rallies every few days, and he's still saying, that he was screwed out of the election.
but on a real sense, Joe Biden got 80 plus million votes. Joe Biden. Hard to believe.
Well, I won't even go there, but it goes back to my point about, if the economy is tanked, um, you're going to have a hard time winning, and Trump tanked the economy.
COVID tanked the economy, not Trump.
No, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a partisan and just go, Trump was president. He had a bad economy.
But when the economy was going really good, the economy was going really good before prior to COVID. The Democrats never sang his praise, but immediately things started turning bad because of COVID. And
Well, I think for 2 years the economy was doing very well for reasons that I don't necessarily approve of. Um, Now, let me know if I go too far with this, but if MAGA is supposed to be a populist movement, I don't see how giving tax cuts, to the very rich helps the common man. And that trickle down, if you give.
Zach, please just mute. Zach, mute for now. Go ahead, Sandy.
Well, no, I don't. I think MAGA is it. It says it's populist. I just don't agree with that. Um, Giving tax cuts to billionaires or millionaires, the very rich, that's not populism. And
But
trickle down economics has been proven that it doesn't work. Trickle down
but
economics does not work. There are conservative economists who would agree with that, with that point. So MAGA
but
says it's populist. MAGA says, hey, we're going to bring, Frigidaire and manufacturing back and all this stuff. It did not.
so what made Trump's economy great for the first 2 years?
He,
If
he cut regulations. He gave, a huge tax cut, and business felt bold.
so,
Hey, we got a business owner in office. Let's run. And you have to understand things like the stock market, 50% of the economy is how good you feel about the future. It's predicted. And
mm,
I think Trump, as a business owner, he gave, the business people confidence. When Bush Senior called trickle down economics voodoo economics, he was actually right. It's voodoo. It's how you feel.
that's interesting to note. So,
Yeah, I can actually, I have stuff to back me up.
all right, Zach, go ahead.
You're still talking about Ukraine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know what? I don't really have that many words to say. I mean, this is something that me and my brother was talking about. It was just a hypothetical statement. Do you think that if Trump gets reelected, do you think that a draft could potentially happen?
A draft for what?
A draft for war?
Which war? War with who?
War, like, do you think that Americans would have to be sent to Ukraine, like, to help fight in the war?
I doubt that will happen. I doubt it will get to that point.
It was just a hypothetical statement that my
Well,
brother.
if there's a war, isn't there supposed to be a draft? If there's a war, people have to fight, right? So
We'll draft drone pilot.
Right. I mean, that's all I have to say.
Okay, 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 that's good. So, what have we talked about? Did we talk about abortion? Yeah, we talked about abortion. So, well, when is the elections? It's on Tuesday, right? Tuesday is the elections. The elections, the main elections itself is Tuesday, right,
Well,
Stanley?
I think that the Republicans, when they win, they're not going to doubt election. They're going to say they fixed it. I guarantee you. We fixed it. We won. It's the way it ought to be.
I just hope that no funny business happens this time. I mean,
Funny,
things like,
funny business didn't happen in the first place. Um,
well, I think votes having to count votes over a number of days. I think that's funny business to me.
I disagree.
Has there been a precedent like that before, where votes were counted over a period of days? I mean,
Yeah,
in 2016, by the next day, we already knew who had won. How come this time it
that's
took that much?
well, that's because the numbers were more or less overwhelming. It depends on the state. What people don't understand is in battleground states, states that are purple, it takes longer.
And this happens in all elections, or it was just unique to the Trump
I think
alone
it's
showdown?
I think it's been getting worse since um, probably 2012. But you remember way back in what year was it? Bush won in what? Was it 2000? They went to the Supreme Court, so there've been close elections. You go back to Truman. Remember Truman holding up the newspaper that says Dewey wins? They've been close elections forever.
Yeah, we've been close elections, but my concern is not even the closeness of the election. My concern is the
That
time it took, to count the ballots and for a winner to emerge. I thought a lot could have gone wrong within that time frame. A lot of funny business could have happened.
I just don't think there was funny business. I mean, there's always going to be. There was a dude in Georgia, a Republican, who voted in Florida and tried to vote in Georgia. All the election fraud or attempted election fraud that happened in Georgia, none of it was Democrat.
Mm.
So, and that's just, anecdotal. So, I'm not going to say that like a larger problem, but um, I think Trump and the people who are still going on about, he was frauded out of an election. You don't 7 million votes. You'd have to be like a Bond villain to engineer that kind of fraud.
It's all about the numbers. Numbers can be manipulated.
I was waiting for Trump to go into hanging chads.
What's hanging chats?
Go back and research. Was it 2000 when Bush v. Gore, I think it was, went to the Supreme Court and Bush Jr. wound up winning the election because they
Mm.
halted the Florida counting of ballots. And I think the Supreme Court is really gun shy on getting involved after that. Um, I Trump lost, and it was the economy and his personality.
I think it was COVID that wrecked him anyway. COVID wrecked him. with the deaths and all that. That's
Well,
majorly.
yeah, it was COVID, and you know what? He could have managed it better.
How? What could he have done any better?
Well, no, is Zachariah still there?
Zach,
I had to run an errand. I'm sorry. I'm still around.
Oh, cool. I just think that um, I think I think Trump could have been truthful because he knew it was a problem, according to Bernstein's book. Um, if sometimes you just have to be honest, and I think back to the first 15 or so people that were on that cruise ship that Trump didn't want the people off the cruise ship because it would inflate his COVID numbers. And I knew right then that this dude doesn't even understand numbers. And he's supposed to be a businessman.
how? So what should he have done in that case? Let them in. What
Truthful,
number?
if it's going to get bad, warn
Mm,
the American people. Y'all need to go out and protect yourself. Now, I
mm,
do think that Fauci opened himself up. Um, he was, the mask thing that they want to blame directly on Fauci. I guess it's fair to do that because he should have just quit and said, y'all can do this, without me. But
mm.
um, the shortage of masks, and the funny part, the mask shortage, the pharmaceutical stuff, that stuff's
Mm.
manufactured in China. Um, and that's not Trump's fault. He inherited, that sort of stuff, but I hope we've learned lessons.
Mm.
There's some vital things that we cannot offshore.
Well, isn't that the one of the downsides of capitalism? I mean, it's a free market. People can decide to open their business anywhere. They can decide to outsource their businesses to China to, and the government shouldn't stop them from doing so.
Well, let me ask you a question. When a bad decision comes back to bite in a pandemic, can the people just go, we don't like this business anymore? Or a president who mismanaged it?
Of course they can. Of
Okay,
course they
well,
can.
then you know what? It's a free market. And quite frankly, voting is a free market.
Yeah.
Trump lost. The free market in votes went against him. He needs to be a big boy about it.
And the funny thing is, I haven't even listened to Trump since he left office. I didn't even know he was doing rallies. Okay, I
Oh,
did know. I
dude,
heard he was doing rallies, but I wasn't watching.
he's
I
got
wasn't
one.
following.
He's got one tonight that I'm going to watch.
Trump.
He's been doing them every weekend for like several months. So, see, that's the other thing. People will pronounce about Trump this and Trump that, but I actually watch Trump.
Mm. So, what are your impressions of him post-election?
I would rather DeSantis at least, you know, I think, well, I kind of put it up somewhere on Facts Chamber. I hope Trump does announce that he's running for president because Democrats will figure out who to run against him. If Joe Biden can win against Trump um, as a nominee head to
Mm.
head, we have to remember that Joe Biden had the mental issues, and he's not running. Joe Biden's not out there. He's running from the basement, and Trump still lost.
That's the funny thing. That even brings me to, because I just remember
That's
now
how bad Trump was.
this was it that Trump was that bad, or
Yes,
is it just the partisan
yes.
politics? Okay, look at Fetterman and Oz, right? And see how, with all the challenges that Fetterman, all the health challenges that Fetterman is having, he's still ahead in the polls. Why? And I heard that Oprah Winfrey just endorsed him today. Why? Is it because the Democrat? Why?
Well, wait, hold on. Fetterman is behind in the polls. Understand that part. What's your question?
Is he behind in the polls or is ahead? Is ahead in the polls?
I think it's either head to head or within the margin of error. And I think Fetterman, as a matter of fact, I watched that debate. Fetterman's probably going to lose.
He shouldn't have been in the race in the first place. That it's even close.
Well,
It's
no, you
worrisome
mean
that it's
after
even
he
close.
had the stroke?
Yeah,
Um, okay, you can make that argument, but we are going. I watched the debate, and to be honest with you, and I'm biased. I will admit that up front. Oz is, dude, he's creepy. But so is Trump. So I mean, I think Oz is going to win it. I think he's going to eke it out.
it shouldn't even be a contest in the first place. That's my point.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? You're entitled to your opinion, but Mitch McConnell said the best quote, the quote of the year, candidate quality. Um, Fetterman, I'm sorry he had a stroke, but Pennsylvania's just going to have to suffer with Oz as their senator. Sometimes you get what you vote for.
So they have to suffer. So it's like,
Well, I think they'll be okay. I mean, Oz isn't going to end the state of Pennsylvania. You know, they'll all survive. But I mean, the one quote he said about um, women's choice, that it should be between a woman, her doctor, and the local politicians.
hmm,
That is creepy. And this
yeah,
dude's a
so
doctor.
creepy. That's creepy. I admit that's creepy. The government shouldn't. I don't think the government should get into that kind of business in the first place.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
If at
And
all,
I
if
don't
there are
I don't mind limits. I mean, there should be limits. You can't be doing it, once viability happens. But it's weird, and I know Zachariah is chomping at the bit, but um why isn't personal responsibility a part of the abortion debate? A woman has the right to be personally responsible in her decision, but it's a hop, skip, and a jump depending on the topic, and it's just unimpressive.
but isn't that part
And
of
government involved in personal decisions, that's like libertarian wolfbane.
but isn't that part of the conversation that the Republicans have always been pushing, that don't have a child outside of wedlock, finish
You know
school?
what? But
Aren't
how does that
those
address?
aren't
How does
aren't
that
those
address the child that is conceived out of, or well, you know what? Shoulda, coulda, woulda is the first thing I think.
no, but of course you cannot literally force anybody to not get pregnant or not have sex. But the messaging is out there. Be responsible with your sexual choices. Don't just put out with anyone and get pregnant and want to have an abortion. So I think the
I don't
Republicans are
think
making
that
that.
abortion is always the option. It's overblown.
Well,
And and if a woman decides that's what she wants to do within limits, of course, um, why is that the government's business? Let's do it this way. It's between the father, the mother, and the priest in the confession, box. I don't see politicians as qualified.
yeah, I think I would agree with that because I think
And and
it's a
you know
moral.
what? I have a 16-year-old son, and dude does well in school. And I talk to him about stuff, but you know what? If he comes to me, where are you gonna meet? You know, well, they're jokes, and I'm not gonna make them. But I'm just like, if you get a girl pregnant at 19 in your sophomore year of college, you know what? We aren't doing that.
We aren't doing what? What are we not
We're
doing?
not doing abortion, but he and I, or I, may not have that choice.
Mm.
Now, you do know me, Charles. I'm not. You know what? Slap on a condom,
Hmm.
and I'll be like really ribald, but a woman putting a condom where it needs to be, that's a thing in and of itself. But um, if I trained him better. You can't control everything your child does. He will take responsibility because that's the way he was trained to be. And you know what? He's smart enough. He can do
Mm.
other things rather than be a mechanical engineer or some weird nuclear scientist.
Mm.
Responsibility, again, to me, it's American culture. We foster bad parenting. Um, and no, I'm not going to babysit the grandchild. But, that's on y'all. If I have to, for a couple hours, maybe. But but I do think about things like that. Why aren't other Americans doing that? Going back to the point of personal responsibility, it doesn't happen at the end of the gun after you fired it. It happens 20 years before.
Mm. That's a very good point. That's a good point. So you shouldn't be at the point of, oh, now this has happened. You should be preemptive. The families, the values, the raising of the children should take these things into consideration and try to stop it before it happens.
Well, you're breaking up a bit, but when we talk family values, education is part of family values. Um, this two-parent home thing, that's the ideal, but when your divorce rate is like what, 50%, people who actually try, to make a marriage work and they don't, it's bigger than, marriage. It's bigger than doing the right thing, in my opinion. And I know Zachariah has stuff to say. It's American culture. Um, we can do better. American culture needs to be more self-reflective.
Zach, let's hear your thoughts before we end this stream.
You know what? I agree with Stanley. We all have to do a better job. I include myself. Um, Again, I'm not the type of person to, you know, blame like my past or my positions in life, but I'm a high school dropout. For those of you that don't know, and I had to take major responsibility by moving to another state in Seattle, Washington. I was moving mattresses in a warehouse for 10 hours a day. but at the same time, I could have also done a way better job in school, right? But it's just life happens. But I'm not going to complain about me not doing well in school, because I didn't do the best. But I'm 24 years old right now, and I still have a lot of time left to go back to school. And I told myself, if I go back to school this time, I'm going to give it my all, and I want to excel. And yes, Stanley is right. Like we want student loan forgiveness, but we also have to ask ourselves, okay, what were we doing? And we had the opportunity to receive full scholarships. We were
Absolutely.
we were bullshitting around. I include myself in that, So
Oh, again, it's looking backwards. You obviously are successful, but
only because of my
m-
uncle. Only because of my uncle. If I didn't have my uncle, if I didn't have my father,
family,
then I don't know where I would be. I'm just thankful that
dude.
I have a father and an uncle that supported me. That's it.
You know what? Let me ask you a question though. Your uncle thought you were worth his help. He saw something in you. That's the whole point. And you obviously made something of it. So you didn't disappoint your uncle.
I didn't, but at the same time, my mom, in Caribbean culture, she would have wanted me to do better, to do a better job in school. But because of my father and my uncle, I grew up upper middle class, so
Hmm.
but again, I tell everybody where I'm at today had nothing to do with me, because I'm telling you right now, like if I didn't have my father, if I didn't have my mother, if I didn't have my uncle, I don't know where I would be in life right now. Definitely, I really
And you
don't.
know what? They knew where you would be, not necessarily, but here's my thing. Pay it forward with your children. Tell them your travails. Tell them how it is. That's where we go forward. You made it and you worked hard doing it. You moved mattresses. Tell your children how you, son, daughter, you don't want to move mattresses. You want to make an A in English.
Yes,
You know,
yes, yes.
however, I might just make you move a mattress just for the fun of it, but
You don't want to do
and
it for a living.
I'll,
You don't
I'll
want to do
tell
it for a
you a
living.
story. My father, who's still alive, he's roughly 79. He ever since I was a kid, to make ends meet, his brother and my grandfather used to literally pick cotton in South Georgia.
Mm,
So,
hard work.
and I I knew my grandfather. He's been, deceased for a while, but um, my father and mother grew up in Jim Crow, Georgia, South Georgia, and I'm sure I don't know everything that the hard part, but the cotton, picking cotton for like $1 a day, yeah, that's in my background, and I know it's true because I can still go down there and see cotton field. And I've tried to pick cotton. My father thought it was funny, but that hurts.
It hurts picking cotton all day, right?
Well, thorns. It's not easy to pick. Um, but the bottom line is that's what parents are for. That's what uncles are for. You learn, you learn from
Right. Like even with the commentary career, I tell people all the time, it's literally because of my uncle's boxing career is where I'm at today. It had nothing to do with me. It's all of my uncle. And my father, like with the modeling and stuff. That's. I'm glad I was. I'm glad I look like my dad. you know. I'm glad that I was able to have sort of a. I don't like using the word privilege. I'd rather just say I'm glad that my family looked out for me, because if I was an average high school dropout, I don't know where I'd be right now, but my family always supported me. So I'm just thankful that I had them, you know.
Yeah, that's good. So, I think this would be a good place to draw this conversation to close. Talk about the US midterm elections and some of the most pressing issues for voters, including the economy, including abortion, including crime, including threats to democracy, support for the war in Ukraine, and student loan forgiveness. And everybody's giving their thoughts. So let me just sort of give my own thoughts on, you know, those who I wish would do well in the election. Obviously, I'm biased to the not the Democrats. I'm biased to the Republican Party. So I'd love to see them do better. I'd love to see them get more seats, if nothing at all, to sort of counter the what I see as madness in the left of the Democratic Party. So let there be some balance. I wish Herschel Walker would win a seat, and I wish so many other Republicans would win their seats. Good Republicans anyway. I don't know all of them. I don't know all of them and what they bring to the table, but just based off of generalizations on the party, I would wish more Republicans win the seats. So that's the stream. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for coming. Like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one. So thanks, Stanley. Thanks, Zach. See you guys.
Take it easy. Bye.
Yeah.